testing thousands of forgotten sexual assault kits. That is the goal of law enforcement officials across the state.
But what does this progress mean for survivors who have waited years, some even decades, for answers? KOCO dove into the progress and what it means moving forward.
It only takes one time and your life changes forever.
Linda Terrell had just graduated with a master's from OU when her life changed forever.
Took away my freedom, my ability to be who I was.
A stranger came in through a window, sexually assaulting her.
I don't think you're ever at the other side. You know, life is always before and after. Even though this happened so long ago for me, it's a part of who I am.
Like Linda, many rape survivors spend decades in fear with no answers and no justice. Their sense of safety shattered.
There weren't fingerprints. There wasn't any way to figure out who this person was. And so I spent 28 years looking over my shoulder.
Bringing those offenders to justice, a mission Oklahoma has been working to make a reality. In 2017, there were more than 7,200 sexual assault kits untested in Oklahoma, sitting on shelves as victims were forced to continue with their lives, waiting for a call that may never come.
I was scared in my home. I was scared outside of my home. And my life changed as a result of that.
To address the backlog, former Governor Mary Fallin created the Sexual Assault Forensic Evidence Task Force, which is now a state board, to identify where these untested kits were. Linda now helps lead that board.
Ensure that the backlog of rape kits that have not been tested in the state of Oklahoma, which is a national issue, are taken care of in a way that is responsible.
There are 3 labs in the state that test these kits. The Oklahoma City and Tulsa police departments each have their own. But testing kits from the remaining parts of the state falls on the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation.
We have had several cases that would not have been prosecuted and arrest would not have been made without this program.
Thanks to grants, those 3 labs have made significant progress, leading to analysis on more than 2,600 of the nearly 3,300 cases in OSBI's inventory. And testing even one of those kits could be the key to solving a string of sexual assaults.
Most rapists are serial rapists, and that's what these kits are so important to get tested are showing, you know, that people think, oh, it's one time, but it's not one time. Just getting one perpetrator off the streets could mean hundreds of victims are saved.
Once a kit is tested, DNA is submitted into CODIS, or the Combined DNA Index System. OSBI's testing has led to nearly 440 DNA matches. That DNA evidence helping track down cases from as far back as the 70s.
I am a survivor of a sexual assault that happened in the 80s, and the rapist was caught 28 years later, not as a result of this rape kit testing, but because he was caught in another state and his DNA popped up.
The man who raped Linda was connected to dozens of sexual assaults across the country. His crimes escalating with every day he spent free.
I was the first person they used a weapon with. It was a razor blade. So, but he progressed, and that's typical for rapists, is to progress.
OSBI says when a rapist is incarcerated at the Department of Corrections, their DNA is entered into CODIS. But without a conviction or by avoiding prison with a plea deal, that DNA never makes it into the database.
Rapes are already underreported, and then you're talking about incarcerations that are so incredibly rare.
Last year, Oklahoma lawmakers passed a bill that eliminated the statute of limitations for rape if there is DNA evidence. With crimes solved, survivors are forced to relive what happened to them years before.
I can tell you that it completely re-traumatized me for a long time. Now, I'm a lucky one. I got to see him sentenced to 177 years for his cases just in Oklahoma.
But new laws in Oklahoma have also given rape survivors more access to information about the progress of their sexual assault kits.
It has to be turned into the OSBI within 20 days now. We do have a tracking system now that they're, put the serial number in, and we can keep up with those kits as far as where they're at and how long they've had them.
And the work can't end there. Those grants that made the testing initiative possible will run out in the coming years. OSBI says it will be up to state or federal leaders to make sure funding remains.
My hope is that we go on and we continue to work these cases, and we make sure that we don't ever have a backlog again.
Linda says the most effective way to change the culture of sexual assault response in Oklahoma is to believe victims and to simply talk about it.
I think we have a ways to go. I think it's important for us to handle this topic with dignity and educate people about it, but not shy away from talking about it, because it happens way too often.
The Oklahoma City and Tulsa police departments have also made significant progress in testing, which has resulted in about 300 CODIS hits.